This is Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com. I hope you enjoyed this Critical Thought, your daily discussion on game design. Hello and welcome to today's Critical Thought. Before we get going, thank you to currently 793 subscribers. We actually hit 794 today, but we unfortunately lost one. If you've been enjoying the content here, be sure to subscribe to the channel. When we hit 800, there'll be another Let's Break vote here for fans to decide what they'd like to see next, as we slowly but surely make our way up to 1,000. If you haven't already checked it out yet, be sure to go to patreon.com/gwbycer if you like to support Game Wisdom and everything that I do. You have until the end of October for early bird reward pricings. After that, they will all go away back to the normal ones. It is once again a lazy Sunday, so let's talk about something we are all used to, and that is the grind. Grinding is one of those terms that every gamer dreads, and it's a sure sign that a game's design has failed in some way, shape, or form. We talked a little bit about grinding and the trouble that it causes with a previous Critical Thought focusing on progression. But for today, I want to talk more about the act of grinding and what is it. Because as we all know, grinding is you're still playing a video game. The game hasn't stopped, you're not doing something else, but it's when a game no longer becomes enjoyable. And I usually use one kind of definition for what is considered grinding. And that is when the player loses all forms of progression and is forced to repeat one task until they're able to move ahead. And I know that's not the most easy to pronounce definition, so let's talk about what that means. Grinding in games is typically seen in RPG or abstracted game designs, and it's when the player is essentially stopped. When we see in RPG-like games, it's when the player is basically forced to fight something that is just beyond their scope. If I'm level 5 and there's a level 10 enemy, it doesn't matter what I'm going to do, this guy's going to kick my ass. Which means the only way for me to get around it is to level myself up. What that means is all forward progress in terms of the plot or the gameplay is put on hold until I essentially do this level check. When it comes to RPG or abstracted mechanics, this can become all the worse when you start throwing in skill as well. Borderlands is an infamous example of what happens when abstracted elements get in the way and cause grind. As you know, for those of you who play Borderlands, enemies and their stats become scaled in different directions based on the level difference. If an enemy is higher than you, they will get a bonus towards their damage, and you'll get a reduction towards yours. Meaning, of course, that it'll take them less hits to kill you, and you'll take a lot more. Anyone who has fought an enemy in Borderlands when they're like 5 or 6 levels above you can attest to that. And then the reverse is true if you're above the enemy. At this point, you can kill the enemy very easily, but you'll get maybe like 5-10 points of experience, which doesn't mean much later in. The grinding comes into play when you come into these situations where the enemies are higher than you and you have no means of fighting them. This is when you enter a new zone, and let's say you're level 20 and the enemies are level 25. This means that the only way for the player to keep going is to keep killing the enemies comparative to them and just try and force that level, because there's no more quests for them to do. And that is a major point of grinding, when there is only one way to go. One of the best ways to avoid or mitigate grind is to present multiple options. Let's say I can either go on quests, maybe I can go into an arena and fight, maybe I can go after elite enemies in another zone. Basically, as long as there is a plan B, it helps cut down on grinding. And one of the best examples of this, and one that I'm surprised more developers haven't copied yet, is from Guild Wars 2. What they do in Guild Wars 2, it's your semi-typical MMORPG. Enemies who are higher than you are going to do more damage. If you're going to progress, you need to level up and get all the way up the leveling curve. Same thing we see in World of Warcraft, EverQuest, etc. But what the developers do is the player is always scaled depending on what zone they're in. And as long as you are in a zone that isn't above your level, you will always be comparative to the enemies, quests, experience, and loot that you find. And that's a really big deal. What that means is, let's say I'm level 50 and I go into a zone that's considered level 10. What's going to happen is my stats are going to be dropped down to what would be like if I'm a level 10 character. But if I kill an enemy, I will get experience comparative to if I was fighting a level 50 enemy. And the same goes for loot. Because all the loot is scaled to the level of the zone, it means even if I find something better than what I have, it's not going to break that zone. And this afforded the developers the luxury of essentially making it that anything that you do in Guild Wars 2, you will always make progress. If I'm stuck in a level 70 zone, I could go to any of the other zones in the game, complete quests, fill up my achievement log, and just keep doing stuff that will afford me progression. There is never a point in Guild Wars 2 that you will just have to grind normal enemies, because there's nothing else that will move you forward. And this is something, like I said, that I am surprised more MMOs and even just single player RPGs have not copied yet. Borderlands could have really have made use of that, especially when you tend to out-level all the quests in the zones, and then you're just forced to grind enemies until you hopefully get that level up. Now, the other part of grinding is when essentially something is blocking you from going forward. Maybe you need to get enough gold. Maybe you need 10 more stars. We see this in a lot of games, especially those built around casual or free-to-play design. When they say, oh, well, you collected 50 crops. If you want to unlock the next one, farm 100 more. And games like Candy Crush, Farmville, any number of free-to-play games have made use of grind in their design. It goes back to what I was talking about with pay-to-win and free-to-play games. They know that if they just make their game forcing the player to spend money, no one's going to play it. So they try to hide it around saying, well, you could play the game for 10 more hours, or give us $2 and we'll just skip you forward, or you'll get the resources right then and there. And it's also why a lot of people like myself don't like to see grind basically made as a part of your game. Like I said, the best way to cure grind or mitigate it is to always present the player with multiple options, or allow elements to give them multiple ways of progressing. In Etrian Odyssey, for instance, and even dungeon crawlers like that, there is a sense of grind by the fact that you need to level up characters to raise their skills or unlock new skills to allow them to fight. But while you're fighting enemies, you're getting materials that you can use to create new weapons, you're getting gold and resources that can help you out further. You're basically not just doing one thing, or there's only one avenue. And that takes me to a really good example of when grinding can essentially appear even though the game doesn't change. And that is the Darkest Dungeon. Anyone who's played the game to the end game, when you're preparing to take on the Darkest Dungeon, knows that the game becomes grindy. What happens is, the only way for you to beat a level in the Darkest Dungeon is you need to cultivate 4 heroes to get to level 6, you need to level up all their armor and weapons, you need to make sure you have all the trinkets that you need to work, and then you still have to hope that RNG doesn't screw you. What happens is, progression is stopped. Let's say we have a wall right here, and the only way you're going to get through that is with a very specific group leveled up exactly, and every time you fail, you need to repeat that. And that is another part of grinding. And like I said, there's two things you never want the player to feel. The first one is that they're not making progress. If I'm spending 10 hours trying to get my character level enough to beat your guy, for the whole duration of that, it just feels like I'm going through the motions, that I'm basically, pressing a button and not doing anything else. The other thing, the player should never feel that they're losing progress. And that is the big killer of the Darkest Dungeon. If you beat the Darkest Dungeon level, good on you. You get to move on to the next one. If you don't, well, guess what? You're going to have to repeat everything that you just did again until you can get the characters and the skills to get back into the Darkest Dungeon. It's what I talked about with Shiren the Wanderer as well, with the optional stuff. And right now I'm playing Star Vikings, which if you haven't watched the developer live play yet, be sure to check that out on the channel. And there is a big part of grinding when you need to get fuel. And the only ways to get fuel are to either complete the extra hard challenge maps or get lucky while you're opening treasure chests. But they've also added the extra punishment that if you lose all your Vikings during a level, anything that you've earned or collected during the level is wiped. And again, like I said, if the player loses progress, they're going to become very annoyed. Now, going back to what I was talking about a few minutes ago, with eliminating or reducing grind, again, as long as the player is not stuck doing one thing that basically puts them in autopilot mode, you can avoid grinding. In the original form of World of Warcraft, back in, a very long time ago, in 2004, the game had an issue with quests. Essentially, if you just follow the quest line from start to finish, you would not get enough experience that way to move on to the next quest chain, because they were locked to levels. So what happened was, let's say you're at, I'll give you my example. I was at level 40 with my Warlock, and with all the questing that I did, I stopped at like level 47, level 48. That meant I had to do nothing but farm regular enemies for 2 whole levels worth of experience. And after that, I was just so frustrated and tired of the game that I just stopped playing. Now, in later versions of World of Warcraft, especially with the expansions, that has been reduced, because now there are more than enough quests that you can do so that there's never a break. And this is what Guild Wars 2 did, but I think in a much better way. You're always going to have something to do. You're never going to have to just do one thing. And that, again, is where grinding comes in. And with games like Candy Crush over there, or Farmville, and other free-to-play or pay-to-win games, it's why we just don't like them, is that grinding is not mitigate or reduce, it's part of the game. And we could spend even more time talking about the monetization elements and stuff like that, but I think we'll wrap things up. For those of you listening, let me know in the comments below, what are some examples of games that grinding just killed it for you, that you didn't even want to keep playing, it was just such a horrible experience? Or do you have examples of games that managed to avoid the grind in some way, shape, or form? And that just reminded me of one other big example that I want to bring up. DC Universe Online, and this was right around the time it just made the transition to free-to-play, and they were still adding in more content, had a very big issue with grinding. What they did is all the gear you wear contributes to your gear rating. And this gear rating essentially locks you from certain high-end quests or endgame quests. Until you hit those points, they won't allow you to go on those quests. And this creates a very annoying situation. You're so high up that you can't do normal story missions anymore to get the gear and the experience you need. But you're not high enough to do the high-end quests that will get you the gear that you need to do high-end quests and progress further. So you were forced to do like daily plays and just grind out PvP until you get the tokens that you need to complete the high-end but low-tier endgame gear, so that you can go on those high-end quests to get the high-end endgame tier. It's as confusing and as frustrating as it sounds. And once again, that is grinding in a nutshell. You are forced to do one thing until something breaks, and then you can continue onward, and hopefully there's no more grinding. But again, as we've talked about, abstracted games tend to really make use of grind, because it is all about numbers and stats rather than player skill. It doesn't matter if I am the greatest World of Warcraft player in the world if I'm trying to take on raids with level 40 gear. Likewise, Borderlands, Diablo, you name it. Now, Diablo, as they've been doing more with balancing loot tails and stuff, have eliminated the grind to some extent. And essentially, as you're making progress, the game grows with you. So you're never put into a position where you're going to fight something that's weaker than you or stronger than you. Now, of course, you can adjust that with difficulty modifiers, but that's another 20 minutes. So let's end things here for today's Critical Thought. As always, once again, thank you to 793 subscribers. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you've been enjoying things, and let your friends know. We are so close to 800, and we can do another Let's Play vote. If you haven't watched the current one of the Alone in the Dark play, be sure to check that out, as I'm actually nearing the end of the game. And of course, I hope you've been enjoying the content here and on GameWisdom.com as well. Once again, I'm Josh Bycer. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all tomorrow with more great content here and on Game Wisdom. Have a great day. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoy it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and of course share with your friends. It always helps out. For daily posts on all manner of game design and industry topics, check out game-wisdom.com. To support the site and everything that I do, be sure to check out the Patreon campaign. If we can hit goals, it will mean more content for everyone to enjoy, and I'll be able to support myself and my household. If you want to follow me, you can find me on Twitter at GWBycer for updates throughout the day and random thoughts from me. And lastly, you can find me on Twitch right over there at GWBycer for daily streams most nights around 10 Eastern. Thanks again for watching the video, and be sure to check out more great content coming to the Game Wisdom channel real soon.